Welcome to yet another episode of the Bonsai Stuff podcast. As always, I'm Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu, and I really appreciate you listening in. So in this episode of the podcast, I'm going to talk about bonsai wire. I know, it sounds dry, sounds horrible, but it's not, I promise. It's got purpose. So I want to talk actually quite a lot about bonsai wire and uses and why we do it and reusing and all that sort of stuff. And I want to sort of talk a little bit about an experience that came up the other day that I want to relate back to bonsai for me. And it's got to do with, of all things, a mosh pit and bonsai. So I'll explain that one a little bit later on. But it's been a really nice week this week in the world of bonsai for me. I love this time of transition between seasons. And there's that guessing game we all play where if is it time to do this? Is it time to do that? Is it too early? Is it too late? Talked about fertilizing being, I'd rather be on the earlier side than the latter side. But it's that change of season where you never quite put your finger on exactly what's happening. And for me, if I had to put money on it, I would have started fertilizing earlier rather than later, because we've had colder nights. Definitely feels like where I'm based in Melbourne that things are changing a little bit quicker. Definitely got a cool chill to the air at night. We've still got very warm days, nice good runs of 30 degrees here and there. There's some rain, there's some wind, there's all these different things going on. It's damn near impossible to get the watering spot on at this time of the year. So my advice on that front for everybody would be to overwater rather than underwater, especially if you're using the tea bags for fertilizing. The only way that the goodness gets out of the tea bag and into the soil for the tree to take, for your bonsai to take, is through the water. So I always think if I'm not watering if the tree's not getting the fertilizer, therefore it's not as effective. It's still a growing period for the tree in one shape or another. So I'd rather have a little bit more water than not, whereas in winter I'd rather be a bit on the drier side than the wetter side. So I always think that I'm doing some good, at least by overwatering slightly for the fertilizing of the trees. So I'd rather be on the front foot. Anyway, enough about that. Let's have a little chat about bonsai wire and see where we finish up, eh? Where would we be without bonsai wire? And I mean that wholeheartedly. I've seen a lot of trees that have been just clip and grown. Some look great, but for me, the real artistic flair comes out with wiring. And whatever, horses for courses. What you want your trees to look like, absolutely nothing to do with me in the slightest, as long as you're happy. But wiring allows us to make the tree a lot stronger. Sounds funny, because my first thoughts when I saw bonsai wire on trees was that it was about restriction, and that was the magic thing. Oh, that's how they hold the tree back. That's how they stop it from growing, is by putting that wire on it. It couldn't be further from the truth. The wire, in one of the main approaches that I use, other than the beauty side of things, is to have it so my branches are positioned nice and neatly. And I talked about the top-down view, that one of the last steps that I do when I'm designing trees is to sit there and have a look at the tree from the top down. And that's when it really comes to its fore with bonsai wire, because you can manipulate branches slightly so everything's getting equal share of the sunlight. And it's brilliant. So we use it on the design side, but horticulturally I can make it stronger by actually applying wire to the tree. You need to get a few things to get out of the way first. You need to improve, no matter what stage you're at, me included, everyone in the whole bonsai world, everyone needs to continually improve the way that they wire. Some people wire brilliantly, they wire really well. I work my bum off on trying to get my wire and maintain it to a certain level, and it takes repetition. Kicking goals in the footy takes practice. Just because you've done it once doesn't mean you can do it for the rest of your life. So you need to keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over. And I find that with wiring, it's definitely one of those things that Maybe if you're a bit rusty, if you're not match fit, if you're not ready for what you've got in front of you, then it can feel like hard work. But then when you've been doing it for a while, things seem to flow. And I guarantee you, when it gets to pine time in early winter or very late May, or very late autumn, early winter, and I'm working my way through my pines, I definitely don't start with my best one. I'll start with one that's I can stretch out the cobwebs and maybe get my plucking technique back and go, that's right, I've got to do it like that because you're going to damage that part of the branch. I'll be in there with scissors and tweezers and cutting things and making mistakes, and I'll be starting to wire and I'll be breaking things off and I'll be damaging. But by the time I finish that first tree, or the first couple of trees, hopefully, well, this is what's happened in the past, my skill level returns to where it is. So then I start improving the quality of the tree that I'm working on because my output is so much better. So I find that with wiring, you really need to be sharp with it. You need to make sure that you're doing things to the best of your ability. So while I'm talking about wire, a couple of things that I wanted to check off on with the podcast was about reusing bonsai wire. Now, this is I don't know if contentious is the right word. I think there's a lot of different opinions out there. So, hey, it's my podcast. I'll give you my opinion and what I think about it. Now, my focus always, 100% of the time, is on the bonsai, on the tree. What's best for the tree? How can I do better by the tree, or how can I improve this tree? And I would strongly recommend that you don't let cost become a consideration when it comes to you with your bonsai, because you'll find that if you're considering costs, if anything, repotting, the soil mix, the medium that you're using, there's a compromise. The cheaper, maybe not so high-end quality stuff, the cheaper it is, well, the less the result you're going to get. I've talked about starting out young stock with really good soil, which seems like the complete opposite to what almost everyone in bonsai does. They always start the young stock with crap soil, whereas I'm a believer that you build the base for the tree as quickly as possible, and then the rest of it develops a lot quicker than when you finally have the penny drop and move to better soil. So reusing bonsai wire for me is in that same category. Removal of wire with unwinding and cutting wire, that's a different approach. But the reusing of the wire is something that I can hand on heart say I don't use, I do not do, and I don't think it's going to give you the best result possible. There are circumstances, yes, when you can reuse it, and that might be on young stock where you're not really concerned and you're just putting some rough movement on them. But once that wire's been manipulated and bent and creased and folded, whatever's happened to it, there's tough spots. There's not going to go on quite so easily, and wire is not wire. You want wire to be very effective. You want wire to achieve an objective. And I find that when you reuse wire, there's more damage that can be done. The tough spots, the inside, of the wire, if it's been on the outside of a bend previously, can still have that bit of an arc in it, and you press it against the trunk or the branch, it can dent, can bruise, can cause damage. Maybe not hold quite like it should. So reusing the wire, I don't know. In my notes, when I was thinking about this, reusing the wire, I love recycling, don't get me wrong, and the wire goes into my recycle bin, no worries at all. Do I reuse it on my trees for the cost of what the wire is compared to the emotional and monetary cost of the bonsai that I'm working on? Would I consider it viable to save a few cents? No chance. That the monetary side of things, as I said, shouldn't fall into the framework when you're considering your tree. I think if you work to everything being the best, to being amazing and as perfect as it possibly can be, your tree will progress faster. It'll look nicer. And, how good is your tree approach to using wire or reusing soil and all that sort of stuff? I think it doesn't pass the test for me, so I wouldn't do it. Wire removal, though, that's different. As I said, my preference is to cut the wire, because I find that when you unwind the wire, especially when you've got the approach or the thought in the back of your head, hey, I'm going to reuse this wire. When you start the unwinding process, you may start making compromises, thinking more about the wire than the tree. And it's very normal, if not 100% of the time, that from the time that you put the wire on the tree until the time you're removing it, the tree's grown, it's changed, it's advanced. So when you could have got your hands in there early on, however dense it was with foliage or however tight it was, it's not the case anymore. It's actually got more foliage, more growth, buds have shot, needles have pushed, whatever it is, something's changed with the tree from the time you put the wire on until you're trying to remove it. So it's actually more difficult to unwind the wire than it would have been to wind the wire on there first. And I hope that makes sense and it's logical, right? So it's harder to get the wire off when you unwind it, and it's going to do more damage for the sake of saving a few cents on what the wire costs you. When if recycling is your issue, put it in a recycle bin. That's as plain as I can get it. Do I unwind my wire? Sometimes I do. Why do I unwind my wire? Because of being neglectful and the wire may have cut in on the tree and I can't physically get my wire cutters in to remove that wire. So therefore you have to unwind it. The unwinding process, you've got to be very careful with it. Talked about it before, but I'll just recap it really quickly. If it's a thicker wire and I can't just unwind it by hand without doing damage, I use 2 pair of pliers. One to grab the tip of the wire, say in my right hand, and working back to the left. My left hand will then hold the first turn of the wire, and I'll unwind with my right hand until it gets to the wire being pretty straight where my left hand pliers are, and then I'll crimp that. I'll let go of that wire and move down one coil turn with my left hand and hold it firm against the branch. Then I'll unwind again with the pliers. So it's just that gentle one wind, unwind with the pliers if it's a thick wire and I can't physically get that wire out. The main thing is, however you do it, is that you want to make sure that you are 100% focused on doing the best by the bonsai. And that means cutting it when you can cut it, unwinding only when you can't, if it's cut in too far, or unwinding the really light stuff around the tip. But once it starts getting quite dense, stop, be careful, because you're going to start having branches threaded and grown and foliage, needles going to start breaking. It's going to make a hell of a mess. So number 1 priority is your bonsai. Number 2 priority is your bank balance. And I'll tell you this, if you're in bonsai, then you need to make sure you've got enough money for bonsai wire in the bank, because these things, they're not designed to be a cheap hobby, but are they one of the most satisfying in the world? And do they make you feel amazing? And are they good for our mental well-being? Yeah, they definitely are. Size allocation, 10 centimeter test, talked about it before. Just make sure that you're using the right size wire for the right size bend. And I'm talking a lot about this stuff now because getting into this, next few weeks in autumn, next few months of autumn and into winter, there's a lot of styling going to go on. A lot of work's going to get done on a lot of trees, and this is where your wiring's going to start being used a lot more. Your trees are starting to head towards dormancy. When they're deciduous, you'll be starting to get wire on there to shape them and open them up and whatever. Pines, cedars, beautiful time to get in there and start wiring and shaping and making them look lovely. So that's why I thought I'd talk about so many different things when it comes to bonsai wire. My advice to you is always step the wire up a little bit heavier than what you think you need. If you need 2 mil, go to 2.5. If you need 2.5 mil, go to 3. If you need 5 mil, go to 5.5. It's always better when you're using non-copper wire to have a slightly heavier wire, because the trees will grow in strength pretty quickly. And if you're just using a wire that's just capable of holding that branch there now, as soon as the tree starts to move and starts to grow, you'll find that all that hard work that you've done will come undone. So always slightly step it up a little bit. The heavier the wire, the harder the work it is. So I know it's so much easier to go lighter because the wire will flow, you'll get the job done, it'll look good, perfect. But, in a very short period of time, those branches won't have set. You'll be back there redoing it, having to take that wire off, wasting all that time and all that money, and possibly doing damage to the tree if you're unwinding it because it hasn't been there very long, and then having to redo it anyway. So get your skill level up, make sure that you're using heavy enough wire. Aluminium versus copper, another big thing that gets talked about with me almost daily. Do you use copper wire? Yes, I do use copper wire. It's really old copper wire that I've had for a long time, because I've found that the cost of copper wire now is, what's the right word for it? Insane, I think is the right word, because it's so expensive now to get it that it's almost becoming prohibitive for a lot of enthusiasts to get their hands on. Even as a bonsai professional, you can still access it, but it's so expensive that there's, I don't know, unless something changes, there may be a shift away from copper to heavier aluminium. Aluminium and copper, they work great. The benefit, if you don't know, copper holds. It's heat treated, so it's very soft the first time you use it. As soon as you adjust it, as soon as you move it, as soon as you put pressure on that wire, it sets and holds, which means you can use a hell of a lot lighter wire to hold a branch in place than what you could do if you use aluminium. And it looks great. It's nice and effective. It's my preferred when it comes to any of the evergreens that I work with. Even Australian natives, I prefer to use it. But there's, I talked about bonsai being an expensive hobby. There's limits for everybody. And copper, I reckon, will fall into that category for a hell of a lot of us, where you'll look at it and go, all right, so I've just got to use slightly heavier wire. Aluminium's readily available. I can buy it anywhere in the bonsai world. Copper, it's expensive. You've got to buy it in big rolls. You need to have a full kit of it, and it's maybe, I know it's the best of the best, but is it something you can substitute out? Maybe. So it's just something I think that the cost will come into. So you want to make sure that when you're choosing your strength wire, that it's going to do the job. There's nothing worse than when you're using copper and it's possibly not heavy enough or thick enough or strong enough to hold the branch, especially when you take into account that, take the fact in that it's very expensive. Once it's been bent, it can't be straightened and reused because it gets very stiff. And if it hasn't held the branch, you've got to cut it off and throw it in the bin and start again. So you've got to practice these things. You've got to become very good before you start using copper. My preference is to use copper when I can, but it's not always possible. Bending the wire, make sure the bend's on the outside of the curve to prevent breakage. You're bending a branch down, you want the wire on the top part of the branch. You're bending a branch up, you want the wire on the bottom part of the branch, just the opposite direction to wherever the bend's going to be. Just make sure the wire is on the outside. Another great tip that I use, and I've talked about this before, is using pliers. To make two pairs of pliers, to use those to actually grab the wire and bend and spread the load or pressure that you're applying to the branch across the entire wire as opposed to one specific area. Find that can make a massive difference for accuracy of the bend as well. When you're using your hands, I don't know about everybody, but for me, I find that big clumsy thumbs can get in the way, and sometimes the bends aren't as accurate as what you like or as pinpoint to where you'd like them. But using that two pair of pliers, one to hold and create a lock, and the other one to bend against that to angle the wire. So one hand stays very still. Normally for me, my non-dominant hand's my left hand. That'll be the one that grabs the wire and holds it at the bend point. Then my other hand, my dominant hand, my right hand, grabs the wire and will then do the bend that I want to do, ensuring the wire's on the outside and it's pinpoint exactly to where my non-dominant hand, the holding wire, is being kept in position. So it's a nice technique, and it allows for real control, which is that's nine tenths of the game when it comes to working successfully when you're wiring and shaping your trees, controlling things. Never bend fast, always bend nice and smoothly. I have that sort of bouncing movement that I use on some of the branches, the bigger ones, that slowly bends things down rather than just going very quickly to where I want to get to. Like if you grab a piece of wood off a tree in the yard, you pick it up and you want to break it. If you do it really, really slowly, you'll find it'll give a lot more flex. If you grab it and you do it really fast, it's more inclined to break. Again, it's not rocket science, and you'll find that by doing things really slowly with the bend, then it'll come to. But also, it's one of those things that you can do over a period of time. You don't need to, bend it all in one sitting. My preference is to do it that way, but if you're doing big bends and using jacks and whatever else, all the artillery that we've got to use, you can do it slowly over time, so it's not quite as stressful and dramatic for the tree. All right, we are getting to the end of this wire section, I promise. Sorry it's been so long, but it's integral to bonsai and to what we do. And it's, like I said, the timing for it just feels like it's right. How long do we leave it on? How long do you leave wire on for? Million times a day, I reckon. No, not that many, but it's a really common question I get asked about how long. Okay, we've wired it. How long? 5 years. Isn't that too long? Yes, it is. On some trees it's not enough. Leave it a month. Isn't that too short a time? No, and yes. It depends on the tree and how rapidly they grow. So as a general broad brush, and this is very general, the younger the tree, the quicker it's going to grow, the more it's going to push its foliage to try and extend. The more it extends, the thicker it's going to get. The thicker it gets, the more it's going to cut in. The shorter the period of time the wire is going to be on there. What is that period of time? I don't know. 2 weeks, a month, whatever. This is where the daily inspection of your wiring is paramount. You need to make sure that you're watching that tree as it starts to get ready to swell. Start cutting it off, and only cut it off in the points where it's swelling. So if you've done a really long branch, it'll thicken normally at the junction. So that's the first part that I'll cut off, maybe 1 or 2 coils there. But then towards the tip where it's a lot lighter, I will keep the wire on there. And then as it starts to thicken there, then I'll come in and I'll cut that off as well. There's nothing more frustrating than removing wire and going, righto, now get the wire out and rewire it straight away because it hasn't set. You've removed the wire too quickly, or it might have set in parts, but not in other parts. So that gradual reduction of the wire on the tree is my preferred approach to managing the wire on the tree. On my older trees, I've got old junipers that have had wire on them. I kid you not, like it's years and years, and only now is it starting to look like it's not even cutting in, it's not even swelling around, it's just tight on the wire. And I've removed it in a few spots, and they've ski jumped back up. So it's like, well, it still hasn't set. It's such an old, slow growing tree that I'll just take my time with it, and I'm not going to rush, and I'm not going to be dictated to by time as to when this stuff comes off. So each tree, each branch individually, assess it when it starts to swell before it starts to get, envelop the wire that's there. You need to make sure that you remove it. Remove it just in sections, and don't go nuts. Last thing I want to talk about with wire is storage and of your wire. Now, this is one of these sections where I say, do what I say, not what I do, because I tear through quite a lot of wire, and I do have a beautiful spool that I really like. I really think it's great. Would I get another one? No chance, because the amount that I use, I'm constantly respooling this wire. If you're not using a hell of a lot of this stuff, and you can get a spool that works really easily for you, where you can store the wire in grades or sizes, whatever it is, gauges or sizes, then, yep, by all means, keep it nice and well stored. If you are tearing through it like I do, then mine just goes into an old milk crate, and it's bloody messy, but I can tell the size of the wire now by feel. But if you can't, put a label on it, just so you know the size. 10 centimetre test, make sure you know what stocks you've got so you don't run out. If it's copper wire, you've got to be very careful, because any movement, any dinting, any folding, any buckling, any pressure that you put on that wire is going to make it stiffer to use. All right, so it's the softest once it's first been heat treated, and then over time, even vibration. I've had them where they've come by boat from Japan, and it must have been a bloody rough boat trip because they got here and they're all hard like rock, very hard to use. I've had other times where it's turned up and it's soft like butter the first time you use it. So it's, I've heard people use stories saying, if it comes from this country, it's rubbish, but if you get it from that country, it's great. I don't think that's got anything to do with it. I think it's how it's shipped and the vibration or the movement as it gets to you is, because once that copper gets moved, it sets and it just gets harder and harder. So your storage for your copper wire is even more important, and picking up and throwing it down and, chucking it over loops and hooks and whatever, it all has an impact. So you need to be really, really careful. And 1 millimeter wire, I strongly advise you, if you're going to buy 1 millimeter wire, and this is from me to you, what you do is entirely up to you. I would buy a really small roll of 1 millimeter wire. It drives me berserk. I hate. Oh, hate's not the right word because it's too strong. I despise it. It always tangles, always makes a mess, and I am just now coming to the end of a roll that I've had for about 15 years. A half-kilo roll, that's how little I use it. I do not wire any branches with 1mm wire. I only use it for guy wires, for pulling down branches, because of the guy wire technique I use. I only need really light wire, and it doesn't need to be super strong or thick, and I want it light so it's not as obvious. But I'm just at the end of life now, and lucky for me, I've got another roll of 1mm wire ready to go that'll last me probably the rest of my life. but if you've got 1mm wire, put it on something. Put it on a bit of PVC pipe. Keep it so it's nice and neat. As soon as you open that packet, within about 3 minutes, it will be a jumbled mess of like bloody tumbleweed. Honestly, it drives me berserk. If you are going to have 1mm wire, it's not strong enough to hold any branches. It might do for a little bit of show wiring, but I wouldn't waste your time with it. But anyway, 1mm wire, it gets my blood boiling. Anyway, I hope that's it now for bonsai wire. There's lots of different things. Hopefully something in there ticked the box for you, but it's absolutely necessary. Will it be something that you use in your bonsai journey if you're just beginning? 100%. Will you use it if you're very advanced and you're at the elite end and your bonsais are looking great? 100% you'll use it. And it's worthwhile practicing and getting to be the best you possibly can, because crappy wiring looks horrible. Good wiring makes the bonsai the star, and that's our aim. Now, another of my loves, my passions, is music. I love music. Always have. I don't know. There's something about it. I love stuff that I grew up with. I love new stuff. I love anything. And it's I love going to gigs. I especially love it when I get to go to a gig, see a band with one of my daughters. Nothing better. Nothing better than having a couple of beers, having a laugh, listening to some great music, getting the train home. Anyway. So I was at a gig the other night, and I do apologise for the last section on wiring dragging on a little bit. It's really important. It's really passionate for me, as you can tell. But I was at this gig the other night, or the week. It was a while ago now. Anyway, and there's this singer from the UK, Billy Bragg. I love him. Always have. Grew up with him, and anyway, stays with me. Anyway, but it wasn't Billy Bragg I got to see. It was a cover band. And anyway, so when we were there listening to him, there was a lot of crowd, a lot of audience, having a good time. Everyone's having a laugh, and he got up and he had a bit of a chat. So I'm not going to claim credit for this one. I just found the analogy between what he said and bonsai world, our world, what we do. Everyone's listening to this to the podcast can get something from. Is he's talking about the global state of things and where the world's at, and there's always something happening around the world for anyone to talk about, and I think one of the most positive things, or one of the things that I like to do in my life, is focus on the positives and be a positive person and be someone that promotes and is looking for positivity in everything and goodness and making the world a better place, one branch cutter at a time. Anyway, so he was talking about mosh pits, and you should know what a mosh pit is. If you don't, jump on YouTube and have a look at what a mosh pit is. But he was saying that the mosh pit looks dead rough and it's competitive, but as soon as someone falls down, everyone tries as hard as they possibly can to pick that person up and make sure that they're okay. And that, to me, when he said it, made the hair stand up on my arms. And I thought that's so true for us in the bonsai world too. Started this year with a bit of a blurt about positivity and getting off anything that's negative, and I'm not going to let things drag me down, because if you don't let it affect you, it can't affect you, and that's great. It's brilliant. That's the best approach, and I haven't looked back, to be honest. And I possibly get a message every now and then. People, did you see this? No, didn't see it. Oh, did you hear this? No, didn't hear it. And it's refreshing. Makes me feel good on the inside, and lets me just get on with what I do and how I do it. But this thought of, as someone takes a tumble in the bonsai world and maybe isn't quite where they should be, I think that everyone around them, us, you, me, anyone that loves these little trees in pots, it'd be really nice if we all just picked them up and made sure that they were okay. There's people throughout the whole world have shit go on, have things happen in their life, and they possibly don't end up where they should be, and they get setbacks. There's a good mate of mine up in Queensland's had it happen to him where he's been set back, but the bonsai community wraps their arms around people like that and lift them up and do what they can. There's not much you can do, but you can definitely be that smiling face on the other end of a message or phone call or text message or see them face to face. And I think that that's a really nice way that I want to finish this podcast by saying that if, someone falls over in our mosh pit, then we should do everything we possibly can to help pick them up. And, sure, we can be competitive, we can be rough, we can whatever, but at the end of the day, we're all human beings. And I think that if we can just look out for each other in one shape or another and make the bonsai world that little bit stronger, then there's nothing wrong with that. And as I always say, what's good for bonsai is good for all of us. And folks, just like that, we're at another end of another podcast. Sad, I know, but these things must come to an end. But don't worry. Hey, guess what? I'll be back next week. As always, haven't missed one yet? No, one at the start of the year. I had 1 week off. But no, I'm back, and I love this podcast. I love you guys too. I love the fact that I get to have a chat to you about different things. And one of the things I've been on at the moment through the yard is Pest Watch. Not just the ones that you can see during the day that eat your foliage or get in there and set up home, draining the resources of your tree. It's the ones that come around at night time and possibly during the day as well and steal your fertilizer. I've had a few big crows in the backyard lately flying off with tea bags full of blood and bone, rotten bloody things. I've had possums nicking them. I've seen on the cameras I've had rats as well. So I'm on Pest Watch at the moment, any which way I possibly can be. And my best approach with that is if they steal one bag, I'll replace it the next day. You just got to be as vigilant as you possibly can because it's going to happen. No point getting upset about it. I still think that the tea bag fertilizing method is the best method for me and for my trees, and the results I get are great, predictable. I know exactly what's going to happen, so I stick with it. I persist with it. I curse, I swear. I pick up the empty bags that have been ripped open around the yard by these rotten bloody animals, and make sure that I keep taking steps forward to do the right thing. But anyway, hope you found that one an interesting podcast. Remember that mosh pit, the bonsai mosh pit. It's for all of us. Let's look out for each other. I'm sure we do. I know we do. I'm certain we do. It's a great community. I've met a hell of a lot of people over the years doing what I do, and I can tell you that they're all the same. Every one of us, we've all got that same passion inside. We've got so many different backgrounds, so diverse, and we might have a different preference of tree. We might get very passionate about how the trees look and how they shouldn't look and all the rest of it. And pots, it's a whole nother rabbit hole to go down. But, at the end of it, to our core, we're all the same. We're all very nice people. So thank you for listening in. I do truly love our time together, and I look forward to you joining me and me joining you next week. Until next time, let me know if I can help you with anything, but happy bonsai.